Hey everybody, welcome to Enemy of My Enemy. I am Hodey Johns.
I'm Lou.
I'm Sam Whiplinger.
This is going well already. That's Lou. That's Sam. Yep. They're representing left, right, and center libertarians today because that's what the show is all about. Today, we're going to talk about UBI, Universal Basic Income. Now, on its face, it seems like an expansion of big government, and in many ways it is. It's the government printing off some more bills, giving it to people. Universal basic income is specifically a monetary theory, and so thankfully it's very easy for people to understand. It is the Fed, and instead of printing off the money and giving it to the people they usually give it to, well, in addition to giving it to the people they usually give it to, they will also give it to your average citizen, and usually it's something along the lines of, are you a kid or are you an adult? They toss around different dollar amounts. It's been experimented with in different countries and different counties, something between $800 a month. If you get more money from a job, there are ways that are debated on how to implement it when you do get a job. So for example, if I work and I make $800 or I can get UBI for $800, why would I continue to work? In which case there's some attempts. Milton Friedman was kind of an example of trying to had some ideas on how to reconcile that balance. Perhaps the most famous of all semi-component proponents of UBI was Friedrich Hayek, one of my favorite guys, though I don't know. I probably have mixed feelings about UBI myself, but he had to say the assurance of a certain minimum income for everyone, or a sort of floor below which nobody need fall, even when he is unable to provide for himself, appears not only to be a wholly legitimate protection against a risk common to all, but a necessary part of the great society. So a lot of different ways we can go with this. Lou, I will have you start by giving your feelings about UBI.
I am personally pro UBI. However, not in a totally socialist sense. I like to look at the UBI as sort of a stepping stone away from an over-bloated welfare state that is bleeding us dry, killing our economy in some ways, and really driving up the amount of money that our government spends specifically on administrative costs. Currently, as it stands, the several different programs that we have, whether it's, WIC, food stamps, EBT, things like that. I apologize. My dogs are barking at who knows what. All of these things, the administrative costs are through the roof. It is unreal, and they're very complicated and convoluted systems, and if you get this, you don't get that, and you have to jump through 87 flaming hoops. It's complicated, and then it also, the current welfare system as it operates is it's not a hand up, it's a hand out, right? And the minute that you make a dime, they yank it from you. So they keep you in this sort of perpetual state of having to depend on those services and that income. And it makes it so difficult for anybody to climb out of a situation and save money, try to buy a house, try to get a better job, take time to study, do anything. So that's why you see a lot of people talk about welfare queens, right? People who just stay on welfare all the time. You can't go anywhere, especially with the current minimum wage. And I know this is really unpopular with a lot of libertarians. And while I don't believe we need to be mandating a specific minimum wage across the board for the entire country, the balance between what you get in welfare and then your minimum wage and what is livable, what isn't livable is really, especially depending on where you live, it's very convoluted, and you can very quickly have the rug pulled out from under you if you get a minimum wage job, which doesn't pay you what your welfare may have paid and covered, but all of that's gone. There's not a lot of a stepping stone. Like, there are some, if you're filing unemployment, but you made a little bit of money this week mowing lawns, and you report that, then they'll, kind of adjust a little bit, but it's not, the balance isn't there. It doesn't add up, right? So I would like to see a UBI implemented where, and I don't know what the dollar amount needs to be, right? Because we talk about every citizen, everybody should have this, and a certain amount for children, and this, that, and the other. But someone in New York City is going to not have the same financial needs as someone in Norman, Oklahoma, or Minot, North Dakota, or Walterboro, South Carolina. Like, all of these places have such drastically different financial needs and their own micro economies. And so there's not a single answer. And I don't know what the magic number should be. And I don't pretend to have those answers. However, if we can sort of take everything that we're doing now and move to a UBI, the amount of money that we would save on a federal level administrative cost is like millions upon millions, if not billions of dollars a year. And I think that in and of itself is a lot more fiscally responsible than how we're operating our welfare system today. I think Yang, I'm part of the Yang gang, I guess. I think Yang had a really good idea. And while I don't know how fleshed out it was, and he was onto something. And I do believe that a UBI like this is something that can very easily sort of wrangle in a lot of those federal expenditures. Do I think that needs to be something that goes on and on forever and ever? Probably not. Something we're seeing here in Indiana happen, and I think all across the country at different levels, depending on where you are, as they're starting to pull back on the additional federal unemployment benefits and things like that, and the extensions, we're seeing a lot of lower paying, like minimum wage jobs clamoring for employees, and nobody wants to work there. And people are saying, you know what? Like, I don't have to work for $7.25 an hour anymore. And I think that pressure being put on those businesses to say, hey, pay me what I'm worth, pay a living wage, is wonderful. And I think that is something, it is an effect of, or, the cause and effect of it, of the unemployment benefits extension that we've had. And it's tough right now, right? It's bumpy and everybody's mad and people aren't making money. But I think ultimately it's going to work itself out. And what you're going to start seeing, and we already are seeing it, is that other like businesses that were once paying lower wages are starting to bump their wages up. I believe around here, there were a couple of fast food restaurants advertising starting at $17 an hour. And that's phenomenal. I think, especially with the cost of living right now, And obviously we know inflation is a problem given this whole situation, but we really putting that pressure on businesses to pay a living wage. I think we're seeing that as an effect of this extended benefit, which is sort of like a pseudo UBI right now. So I do think there are benefits. Of course, I don't want to see, government handouts to anyone and everyone all the time and just blowing a bunch of money, right? There are definitely benefits. I think in the long run, as a stepping stone, we save a lot of money and we take a lot out of the federal government's pockets, which we need to do, and give it back to the people. Those are our tax dollars. I don't want to be spending my tax dollars on God knows what. And I know I mentioned this last time, but things like, grants for studying the sexual habits of ducks on cocaine. Like, why are we spending money on this? Give me a UBI instead. I will use that in my economy locally and stimulate more jobs in the local economy and things like that. Like, there are much better ways to use the money that we pay into the government and get that back. And I don't know. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan of the UBI.
All right, Samuel, let's have your thoughts on universal basic income.
All right. So basically, I found out I was going to be on this podcast, like an hour ago?
Yeah, less
Less than an hour ago. And I thought it was about
ambush.
Yeah.
I thought it was about UTI. So I was just kind of about it.
There's a clue for that.
Drink cranberry juice.
Yeah. So, I just threw some stuff together real quick. But one of the main issues with UBI is just the most obvious anti-libertarian view, which is you're going to be forcing people to, at gunpoint, participate in this program. So basically, I mean, you're not just getting money for free. You're taking it from some people and you're giving it to other people. I find that highly unethical. So that's just kind of the first one. But then there's like the, is it helpful though? So like if it's helpful, I mean, if I wouldn't be a libertarian if I didn't think it helped with human flourishing and all of that. So let's see, you're taking money from people who are bad with money and giving it to people, or you're taking money from people who are good with money and good with wealth creation and giving it to people who are not good with wealth creation. So if I walked into like a third world country and was like, hey, UBI, everyone gets $1,000, like it wouldn't work. So it's not like some magical wealth creator, but if I do it in America, it would work, but it would cost us a lot. And so what, you got to think of what would it cost us. I like to think of two. I'm a little disorganized. Okay, I like to think of two. This story of a guy who needed to get on a plane, and he didn't have a ticket, so he asked people, and the person on the microphone asked, "Is there anyone that would be willing to give up their plane ticket for this person?" No one volunteered. So she asked again. She says, would anyone be willing to give up their plane ticket for this person? They just found like a liver transplant for him and he needs to get to the hospital in order to save his life. And of course, everybody volunteered. So the idea is that we do owe each other something, but it doesn't have to be by force. We can, voluntarily just help each other out. And that's the most efficient way of doing it. I know one time I gave money to a guy on the side of the road, and then later I found out on Facebook like he was just scamming everybody, and he did it in several towns and he didn't need any money. And so it occurred to me like I should just donate to well-known charities who know what they're doing instead of just giving it to some random person and hoping it works out. I think UBI would be kind of similar to that. Like you're just giving it to the government and hoping that. No, it doesn't really work. All right. All right. The other issue with UBI is it's super efficient. I know it was brought up that it's very inefficient to our current welfare state, which is great because a lot of people don't participate in it. A lot of people, all those hoops and whatnot you have to jump through, people avoid it. So there's more people in the labor market creating wealth, making us not a third world country. If you look at, I would rather have people creating wealth as much as possible, giving money to charities and helping people out, rather than just having everyone, where was I? I'm not very good at this.
You're okay. You're okay. You're talking about the efficiency and giving people money.
Right. So I'd rather be, once you make it more efficient, then it'll be just easier for everyone to opt into this, and there'll be more people opting into it and less people on the creating wealth, which means you're going to have less wealth, which means you're going to just be taking a step back. So I would rather have a more voluntary system. She also touched on minimum wage. It's the same situation there. If I just walked up to a third world country and was like, hey, everyone gets $15 an hour, like it wouldn't work because no one would have a job because no one is able to create $15 an hour worth of wealth. All you're doing is you're limiting the people who are, if you say $15 an hour, everyone under that is not going to be able to have a job, or they're going to have to consolidate some way and do less of a job. So like if you said $15 an hour at Walmart, maybe they'll have less people ringing you up and more machines, which a lot of people don't like. So you're going to have to cut somewhere. You can't just magically create wealth by declaring it. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I appreciate that. So I think this is a great position because we have one like pretty for, one pretty against, and I think I'm a bit of both. So this is exactly what we want when we do these type of podcasts. So let me start with my pro UBI stuff. Here's the thing about the Fed. Trying to fix it is difficult / impossible when you ever have somebody who has a legal monopoly over a currency. These types of things are going to happen. And trying to fix that monopoly is difficult, but why not at least try? For me, I think what Lou said rings true. It is something of a step in the right direction. Yeah, it's not decentralizing all currency, but if these people are going to be printing money anyway, shouldn't they at least be giving it to everybody? Because here's the thing, with every dollar printed, every single human being has their buying power go down. And so if it's going to affect every single human being when you print out a dollar, doesn't it make sense that if you print out a dollar, it then must be given to every single human being that deals with the dollar, because you've directly affected their buying power? And that, to me, seems to make the most sense. The other thing is, we have no doubt. How does the Fed operate currently? Look, here's the thing with UBI. They're printing out money without UBI. And how does the money enter the system? This isn't even conspiracy. You can look this up, NewYorkFed.org. I mean, they have it detailed there. How does majority of the money from the Fed enter the system? It enters through big banking partners in the form of a loan. So this is what they do, is they print the money out, yes, or electronically add it to the system. They disperse it to the larger banks. These then go to the smaller banks. How do the smaller banks get it? They get a loan from the bigger bank. Okay. How do you then, as a person, get a loan from the smaller bank or the larger bank? Well, you got to give it in the loan back through them. Here's the problem with the Fed entirely, is they have literally all the bills. So if I print $100 and I give it to 4 different big banks and I ask each of them to give me $26 back, they literally can't do it, because I had all the money beforehand. I printed all $100. There's not $104 to give back to me. Okay. And that's the way the majority, not even just a plurality, that's the way the majority of the money enters the system, is through these big loans that is owed back. Right. So that is already a problem right off the bat. So then you get to the big banks. What do? Well, if they need to make $26 back and they have $25, they have to charge interest and give out loans where the money is owed back to them. So now, instead of them saying, well, I owe $26 back, so I'm going to give some money out to my customers, but I'm going to need $30 back. There's not $30 in the system. I mean, they might get their $30 back because their customers can, but that will come at one of the expense of one of the other banks who gave out $30 or who gave out $25 and now cannot get $30, because, like I said before, keep in mind the Fed at the beginning of this, there's not that money to go around. There's $100 total in this system, in this hypothetical that I've created. But this is essentially how it works. Now, who gets hurt the most by this? And that's the individual, because you are, like, if you have the first access to loan, you're the most likely to be able to pay it off, right? If you say, I took a $25 loan and I owe $26 back, you're more likely to pay that off, because all you got to do is find $1 extra to get from one of these other guys, right? This is the competition. And so you're going to say, I have a way, I'm going to compete, I'm going to get that extra dollar back. But who suffers? Well, business suffers, because they have to then take out a loan to start their business and owe you that money in the process. Okay. And so this goes down and down until we get to the individual or the small business owner or what have you. And what do they get? They get fees for their accounts. They get fees for overdraws, which, by the way, if we're doing the math here, people have to be overdrawn for this system to work. There has to be negative accounts. Not everybody can be positive, because the money starts as a net negative. Every bank that got the money, even initially, starts off with, in my hypothetical, a negative $1, amount, but ultimately, it's negative millions, billions, trillions at this point when we're talking about real life examples. My last part in support of UBI will be that it makes no sense. The dollar is supposed to be tied to economic goods, right? What goods does a bank provide? Now, they can provide a good or a service, but economics, in a very literal sense, for those who have taken the course, is the distribution, the allocation of scarce resources with no alternative uses. That's a very complicated way of saying it's stuff. If a bank's only job is dollars, well, that's not stuff. That can be a service they turn it into. But essentially what you've done is you've given money to people who do not provide stuff. And if a dollar is supposed to represent stuff, then these dollars need to be printed out to the people actually producing stuff. That is generally the people who would be most inclined to get UBI. Now, perhaps somebody who is completely out of work, obviously they haven't provided much, but then again, neither have these banks, and we're giving them literally all of the money. So why wouldn't we give it to also these people here on the bottom, or at least people who are providing the good? And I guess this will transfer over into my negative UBI, why I don't like it commentary. Because the thing is that it's still not tied to an economic good, even if it's UBI, right? Like the problem here is that it's still not tying the money to actual stuff. It's just giving it to everybody and assuming that everybody is providing some kind of economic positive for society. That's obviously not what UBI is. It's not what it's designed to do. And it's not something I think we even want banks to do by saying, well, how much did you provide for society this month? How hard did you work? How much did you actually provide? Now, on a free banking system, this is kind of how it works. You say, I produced 15 shoes, when previously there was nothing. Now there's 15 shoes. Previously there was a lump of rubber worth nothing, leather worth nothing, or minimal amounts. And a bank would look at it and say, okay, so what has been added to the economy? X dollars have been added to the economy. Okay, we are going to add that to the economy. Obviously, I'm going to be a bigger fan of that system than any other. UBI also will reinforce the idea that the dollar is what we need to use. These currencies absolutely 100% need to be competitive. When you start giving everybody money and you force people into a minimum wage, which says you have to operate based on the dollar, why not give them a choice? Why not say, hey, or you can operate on, something else? There needs to be competition to the dollar. Cryptocurrency is not in a perfect place either right now. Libertarians generally tend to absolutely love cryptocurrency. We gush and gush and gush about it. It's like kind of an Easter egg hunt online as far as like how you actually farm them. So it's not like that's given to people who are actually making things either. But it is a step above what the Fed is doing, which generally is giving it to the wrong people, political allies, big banks, that kind of thing, which we kind of don't like. And I don't want to reinforce that power through a UBI that forces people to play on that same system that the Fed is currently using and abusing to death. Ultimately, I understand the point. This touches on a lot of like very early capitalist and socialist literature. Those who are kind of in the know about this will kind of recall a time in history when Marx angered all of his fellow socialists by attacking the capitalists. And it's funny to go back in history and find a time when the socialists were like, oh yeah, the capitalists, like we're homies. Like this is a good union that we have.
Well, the definition of capitalism has completely changed.
Yes, and that is also true.
Racism.
Yeah, I mean, we're changing definitions all the time. That's language for you. I mean, that's just the way it works. Language by definition just changes to, I think the definition of a word is always what the majority of the language speakers say that word is. So if the majority of it's hard because like sometimes it's intentional. Like that's a tough pill for me to swallow because in the case of Marx, he actually specifically said like things that weren't true about capitalism. His fellow socialists called him out on that. And we're like, dude, the capitalists are our allies and you're kind of like burning them to the ground because we're talking about seizing the means. They're talking about individual ownership over the means. That's kind of the same thing. Like these are cool allies and cool people to hang out with. And Marx was like, no, let's pretend they're big government people who want to steal all of your things. And they're these big corporations. Pyotr Kropotkin, Proudhon, I mean, all kinds of people called out Marx for this like crap that he was doing. And so this conversation actually goes all the way back to there. And the reason being is because we're talking about like a base net, like what Hayek was talking about. Like this is what is a base? Is it okay? Can a capitalist believe in a base, a means of saying, hey, I want to take care of everybody. Look, that's fair, but here's the issue is when Hayek's talking about taking care of anybody, he's also using a free banking model and not a monopoly. And that's kind of the toughest part of all this thing is we're trying to make this monopoly do something beneficial artificially by potentially giving it more power in ways that it can exploit it. Ultimately, if we print off more money, what happens to the value of all these dollars? Samuel mentioned it earlier, they go down. And this is the nature of buying power. So I guess I'll turn it over to conversation. Lou, obviously you got to lead off and then you're followed by two people who had mixed feelings. So what did you hear?
Okay. Well, first of all, 15 shoes, Hodey, not 14, not 16. Can we talk?
It seemed, oh yeah, that's right. I probably should have done an even amount of shoes. Huh?
I'm sorry. I was like, I wrote it down real quick. I was like, oh, that's good.
You're being an ableist, Lou. What about all the one-legged folks out there?
You're right.
Come on. That's what I was thinking the whole time.
I apologize. That was very
I didn't incorrectly do the math or anything. This is on her.
Yeah, but was it a right shoe or a left shoe?
Turn it around. Right. 15 left shoes.
I'm going to sort of go backwards. So I'm going to start with like the most recent thing. And I know this is a little bit off topic, but I'm a linguistics nerd, right? So I have studied how linguistic evolution happens and things like that. And I started off as sort of a lit nerd and a grammar nerd and things like that. And I hadn't really dug into the linguistics and the mechanics of linguistics, right? And it's so cool. So I used to argue like, no, racism is anybody who doesn't like somebody else for the color of their skin. Well, yeah, it was, right? And then that has evolved to be more specific. It's a semantic evolution in that word. So the definition has narrowed, right? And same thing with capitalism. Capitalism used to, in a broad sense, mean a free market. However, in our current society and political everything, capitalism and free market are two different things. However, to people from the left, capitalism and free market are two different things, right? Because what we live in right now is not fully capitalism, it's not fully socialism, it's sort of this weird amalgamation of all the things, right? And so when people from the left say capitalism, that's what they hear, right? Or all these government backed or subsidized this, or big banks and this, it's not what they don't think of is the mom and pop shops, the truly free market, right? Like as a lefty, I'm a true anarchist. I would love to live on a commune and like come knock on your door and be like, hey, I have eggs. Hey, could you mow my lawn? Like, that's me. I want to live in a barter system. I don't like if cash stopped being a thing, I would be a happy, happy girl.
I mean, cash is just language, basically. It's
right, exactly. It's a promise. It's an IOU.
Yeah, it's like here's a cow and a half for your whatever, like because instead of just splitting a cow in half, it's
right.
Just language.
Dollar bills are easier to carry than goats.
That's true. Or cows and a half.
I mean, a half a cow. But yeah, so I thought that was really, really interesting. So I love that topic. And one day I'd love to do like a whole episode on like a list of vocabulary and that evolution. So let's mark that one.
My brother actually, he majored in linguistics, and I actually got that definition from him when I was debating like what capitalism and I think racism. It's funny that you bring those two up because those were the two we talked about. He was like, well, you kind of have to go with the way people are talking about it and not.
You do.
The hard part about something like capitalism is I think people do like it's not like there's a consensus on the word.
No,
like you look it up in the dictionary still, and the dictionary definition I love. It's individual ownership. It specifically says that the government can't be involved with the economy. Like it's like, oh, sweet. Like this is a great definition of the word. But how do most like of my lefty friends define capitalism? Not that way. It's very much a government ownership. Sorry, go ahead.
I've done it a few times where they're like, capitalism is just like racism and all this stuff, and that's why there was racism back there. And I'm like, well, actually, you can't have slaves in capitalism. I felt really smart, but I don't think that anyone really cared. Because it's just like, if you know what I mean, it's like, oh, there's that one guy commenting that one weird thing, whatever.
Oh, you're the anti-slavery capitalist. You were supposed to be our right winger, Sam. What happened?
Oh shoot, dang it!
You went there.
Come on.
But it's free trade. You can't just have someone not free. Like it doesn't really work, you know. I mean,
right? Like like on that topic, and I think I see like all these debates, and having come from a more right-leaning perspective, and now I'm like a hardcore anarchist lefty, like I see the miscommunication happening when people are arguing about how terrible capitalism is or how great it is. And the left looks at the right and they're like, you're horrible people and you just want to like enslave everyone and you're terrible racists. In their definition of capitalism, that is absolutely true, and what they believe capitalism to be. And a lot of people on the right who are like, no, it's I do a job and you pay me for it. I create a good and you pay me for it. Like, that's all it should be. It shouldn't be that complicated. They're absolutely right too, based on their definition of the word capitalism. That's the biggest miscommunication, I think, between those two things.
And it's tough because it's so historical. Like, I think as a capitalist myself, I hate the fact that I would let Marx win this by saying like his smear campaign worked, by being like, I lied about what it is and it worked. And I'm just like, I know it's pride, but I just don't like it. I have a tough time letting it go.
It's frustrating.
Yeah,
it is hard. And I think, it's going to take time, and we will eventually, and it may be 10 years or 100 years from now, the word capitalist will either be non-existent or it will mean big, ugly, greedy government backing racists. Like, that's the only options at this point.
Well, I think
and eventually everyone will accept that definition.
Right.
I think
this argument won't be a thing anymore to this extent on this word. However, but I do want to go back to the UBI really quickly.
Not really quickly. That's the name of the show. Go back to UBI. You're good.
Yeah, no. We're talking about UBI. Sorry,
yeah.
I can get on a linguistics tangent.
It's fun.
So really quick, Sam, there were a couple of things, and I'm with you on like the whole, like the government forcing you at gunpoint, right?
Right.
Now, like on taxes, I'm with you, right? If you don't pay your taxes, like we literally force you at gunpoint.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's never been a single thing the government has given you, aside from maybe a vaccine, but we'll talk about that another day. That like money, like monetary value, money, they're never going to force you. Opting out will always be an option when they're giving you money, because it's the government.
True,
Like,
but they're taking my money, right? Through inflation.
Well, they're already taking our money. Let's be honest.
Right.
So if they're going to be taking our money,
right? Why not have them take more?
I want it back. Give it back to me. And if I opt out, then I feel that I have made enough money that the money I've given to the government might be better spent in someone else's pocket.
Sure.
And
so
that's
if
more of a charitable thing, right? Now, that's not to say that like there's a bazillion other things the government spends money on that we don't want to pay taxes for. But,
so if the government just prints, infinite amount of money like they normally do, what do you think the minimum or what should the UBI be set at? Like, why not set it at $1 million?
No, and I agree with you there. I don't know the magic number, and I do.
Right. But my point is,
there's a balance.
Okay, but why is there a balance? Like, why is it a balance? Why isn't it one or the other?
So if I'm correctly hearing your point, Sam, it's if you print $800 and give it to everybody, you technically printed $0 and gave it to everybody, right? Because that's like the new base, right? Like the
yes.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Like there's definitely I'm not a genius at this stuff, right? Like there are definitely things to be worked out. Maybe there's a cap. Maybe there's a fluctuation, the choice to opt out, because I'm going to be honest, is someone like Elon Musk with $1 bajillion going to take $1,000 a month from the government? Like he's probably going to be like, nah, I'm going to opt out. Like that's, he makes so much money. He doesn't care about $1,000 a month from the government. He also probably gets a lot of subsidies from the government, but that's again a different show. But like on a personal level,
but I mean it's gonna be super efficient, so he'll just get $1,000 anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, he'll get it.
So he's not gonna like tell his accountant, "Hey, make sure you don't take that $1,000." I don't know exactly how to work. But my point isn't even that it should be zero. My point is like, how are we figuring out the scale? Like there's got to be some way to figure out whether we should have a universal basic income of like $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month. Like what is it? If we're basing it off of need, then we're going back to like the government taking care of charity, which I don't really agree with. But if we're basing it back off of just like, hey, the government should give us some of our money back, then it's like, well, why don't we go to like $1 million? Like, I don't know. I'm just
I
making questions, really.
I do agree. There's a tipping point, right? And I don't know what the number is, but there is a point where helpful becomes exactly what you're saying, right? Like there's a balance there. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that magic number is, and that magic number may change over time. Hopefully with the end goal being that it goes away, because we've developed a society that can take care of itself, But when I think about a UBI, I think about the people in the middle, people like me or you or anybody who's ever been like,
I'm loaded.
I have to work 60,
handsome and loaded.
Yeah, right.
Stop hogging everything.
Right. At any point in our lives, have you not been like, man, I'm having to work like 50 hours a week and I'm really tired, but I would love to take some time off to go get certified in this, or spend time with my brand new baby because my wife is exhausted. Things like that, right? Like that $1,000 a month can make the difference for somebody saying, hey, I've been middle management for 10 years and all I need is 7 more credits for my bachelor's and they'll consider me to be VP of my department.
Okay, well, one thought I would have was that is people, I think they've done studies on people who win the lottery. Like the average person who wins the lottery is poor again in 2 years.
Absolutely.
So if you're talking about,
give them all that money at once.
Sure. So if you're talking about like, well, let's just give this person some money so that they can get their bachelor's degree. Okay, you're investing in someone,
right?
And you're not going to get, on average, a good return on that investment as you would like if I invested in Elon Musk. So like if the government decided, I mean, this would be stupid, but if the government decided, let's give Elon Musk more money, chances are he's going to take that money and create a lot of wealth versus someone who you just gave money to maybe get their bachelor's degree. And as far as like not working, sometimes it's like if you got paid and you just need to take a break and help your wife and all that stuff, that'd be great. I didn't get to do that because I had to make money. So I was constantly.
Yeah, because there's not a UBI, silly.
Yeah, so I was creating wealth, and the tide raises all ships, and it's like someone was complaining about some poor person, justifiably, just working 2 shifts at Walmart and living in her car. It's like, well, she's still way better off than like most of the world. Like she has a car, like she has a job, she has food. I mean, I would never like tell her, be like, hey, you got it really good actually. But like,
yeah,
like
that's kind of
in
terrible.
perspective, I would rather live in a country that values just wealth creation versus a country that doesn't. And she wouldn't be living in a car.
So Sam, let me turn this back to you, and then I want to go to Lauren with this new question as well, because I think that UBI, what it attempts to do is the stuff issue that I mentioned. Obviously, money is subjective. Where I think we all agree on that it's I am the beholder, and at the moment, printing more money is not making people behold the dollar very well right now. But is there a way to translate this into like what Hayek said, to talk about like some kind of bare minimum, like not even just like money, but like as far as like stuff goes, like, because I think we do want a society that isn't, and maybe you differ, but like, is the goal to just be strictly utilitarian? Like if you provide wealth now, then you are valuable. Whereas if you are not providing wealth, then you're worthless. Is there any room for saying like, hey, you aren't providing wealth now, but maybe you might later, and so I should invest in that? Or maybe just even culturally, out of the goodness of our hearts, saying you should have food because I don't like it when people starve to death. I mean, what do you kind of think? What do you think the solution is? Go ahead.
So yeah, I think absolutely. But I believe in it being voluntary. So like I said, like I gave money to that guy. I shouldn't have given money to that guy. I should have just given it to a charity. There's far more efficient ways to distribute wealth to people who need it. So that's kind of like even like a commune. Like if you wanted to live on a commune, I think that'd be great, and everyone just sort of lived together and participated together, and there was a universal basic income. Something like that would be great, as long as it's voluntary, I guess, would be my position.
Okay. I mean, and Lou, I want to turn to you, but let me rephrase that a little bit, because the concept is always mutual aid, but that tends to be tough on people that aren't ready to provide their part of the mutual aid right now, right? So like, how do we basically say, like, I know you can't help me right now, but I believe you'll be a benefit, maybe not to me, but to society later, I guess.
I think that goes back to the handout versus the hand up, right? I spent a lot of time working with United Way and some other like charitable organizations. And that was sort of our motto for everything that we did. Everything we did for anybody was intended to be a handout, I'm sorry. Whoo, I messed that up. A hand up, not a hand out, right? And I think this ties into my idea that a UBI should not be a permanent solution. Because, as we discussed earlier, your inflation and you're basically at zero all the time. It should not be a permanent solution. Maybe it is maybe there are qualifiers, right? But not just means tested qualifiers. And temporary solutions, those sort of things. There are young adults out there who, married young, had a kid young, but they're really bright. How many times have you heard the story about the 16-year-old girl who got pregnant in high school, and it was really sad because she was like a shoo-in for valedictorian and could have had all these scholarships to this, that, and the other college, but she still lives in this, in mom and dad's house raising her kid because she got pregnant at 16 and lost every opportunity she had. That is your prime candidate.
Invest in her.
Exactly. But that's not a realistic thing for an individual or even a small community to do, to provide $1,000 a month just to keep a roof over your head and food in your belly while you better yourself. So you have the time to continue your education, to invest in a business you want to start, whatever it is. I've been that mom. I've been a single mom driving 30 miles to work because I couldn't afford to live in the city I worked in, but I had to live in the city or work in the city to afford the house I had to feed me and my kid, right? And I guess maybe this is why on a personal level that I'm very pro UBI, because I've always been very anti-welfare, right? I hate it because I'm super libertarian. I'm like, oh, the government's awful, right?
They are? I'm kidding. I had a moment of silence I had to use. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I'm having a moment. But
Yeah,
I
get
did.
there.
I stopped working. I got sick. I was diagnosed with lupus, single and alone. And then an idiot friend totaled my car. And I said, you know what? That's it. I'm going to get HUD housing, WIC, food stamps, SNAP, all the things.
Mhm.
And I went back to school. And I bettered myself. I bought my first house 2 weeks ago because I finally just put my hands up and said, I can't get further ahead if I can't step back for a minute and better myself. And I'll tell you, I'm not an outlier.
No.
I am
believe you.
every welfare queen that's ever been talked about.
Yeah,
You're
Can I-
Octomom? She's Octomom.
I'm Octomom. No, I had one. I'm done. That's it. God love her. No, but I have 2 amazing stepsons and I love them very much. But thank God I didn't physically give birth to them. It hurt.
The one was enough. All right,
So-
go ahead, Sam.
Yeah,
Sorry.
what I was just gonna say is that you should have just pulled yourself up by your bootstraps because I'm a right winger apparently. No, I'm just kidding.
Ah, yay!
I'm about to come to this computer and be like, I was working 80 hours a week, driving 60 miles a day, and I
Right.
had a baby by myself.
Yeah. I would
Yeah,
just throw out that Harry Brown quote where the government breaks your legs and gives what is the quote again? It's like breaks
the
your
government
legs, gives you a
excels
crutch.
at breaking legs and giving out crutches. Yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, if you think of if we had like no taxes, just even no taxes, like that would have helped you out probably a reasonable amount.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no taxes. If we were a wealthier country because we didn't have all this giant government, all this inflation, all this stuff.
Absolutely.
So I mean, basically, you used your crutch, and so I'm proud of you for doing that. It's I would never tell anyone to not use like my wife uses WIC. Like it's great. Like use whatever you can, get whatever you can from the government because they broke your legs. You might as well use your crutch.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, government forcibly shut down my business. There's no way I wasn't taking the money that they paid me. Now it's still them creating the problem, but yeah, like I get that. So
I lost my job too. Same thing. I've been on unemployment since the pandemic.
Yeah.
So let me. I'm going to throw this around and just as a last thing before we head into the break and then get to the piece of my mind segment here. And I guess I'll start by leading with mine, but I just wanted to talk about like what we think the ideal system should be. Because I think UBI is a lot of times saying like, this is the system that we work with and it's the best that we can do. So like, what is the real solution here? And for me, it is, and this is one of the reasons people have kind of seen a shift in my marketing. I was actually reading a post that I made exactly a year ago today to talk about how I was switching from intellectual arguments to emotional arguments. And people are like, well, why? Why are you choosing to be emotional when you could be intellectual about it? I'm like, because honestly, it's what hits your heart and not what hits your head that a lot of times what people act on. And so like I have had like a shift, and instead of like trying to change things politically, I've tried to change things culturally. And frankly, it's just working. I'm having more success. And maybe I shouldn't. Like here's the thing. I get that I shouldn't. Logic should dominate the whole world. Everybody should be a whole bunch of Vulcans, and we all just go around and compute all the proper information and just say, you know what, this is what we need to, this is ideal, this is not ideal. I've done the studies, I've done the analysis, I've done that. But people aren't robots. I'm a Christian, and I have examples in the Bible of God acting illogically, calling himself out for acting illogically and being like, okay, that's emotional. Some examples, I shouldn't kill Moses. I shouldn't wipe out the planet, like even though they're pissing me off or whatever. And in some ways, God's logic, like, made sense, but I'm glad he chose to make the emotional decision, which was being like, but I still love him. Like this is still where I'm at. Like I get Moses deserves to die. All who fall short of the glory of God deserve to die. But that's not why I made this whole experiment. Like I made that because I love them and I want them to improve. get better. And so that's what I'm going with. Now, even from a non-Christian perspective, I just use that because it's personal to me and a story I can share. But like, ultimately, like, these emotional parts of us are still very important. And so for me, it's very important to say, like, hey, because I was once at a time where I was like, UBI's lame, welfare's lame, all y'all suck, get better, work hard. It's what I did. It's what they did. You know what I mean? We all want to be self-made people. And in many ways we can be. I'm not trying to like discourage anybody from becoming that self-made person. I mean, follow your dreams and do what you're good at. Like, do what you're designed to do. Heck yeah, self-made. Well, okay. Well, I talk about it. Lou's living the life over here. Anyway, like, being self-made is awesome, but like, nobody's an island, and like, we understand we live in these societies where these emotional decisions work. So ultimately, my solution to this is purely culture, and it might sound trite, but when we talk about taking care of each other, there's something that happens when I don't think people will stop being persuaded to move in the direction of UBI, which, I mean, frankly, we've almost been doing it for the past year and a half. So like, I find it to be almost an inevitability at this point. But the reason that is winning is because people look at their neighbors and say, I don't trust them to take care of me. I don't trust them to take care of me. My boss isn't going to take care of me if things get hard. My family might not even take care of me if things get hard. My community might not take care of me if things get hard. And I want to share an example of something. And I know this is a personal experience. Again, your experience may differ. But here in Ogden, Utah, we had a homeless crisis, which is just, we created a whole bunch of policies with the lockdowns that resulted in some people being homeless. They made a bunch of tents and they lived in them. And it was actually a choice. In fact, there was some very middle-class people there because they saw what was happening. And they're like, I'm not going to be able to afford my rent anymore. Indeed, they couldn't. I'm not going to be able to afford work anymore. And I'm going to live in a tent. We had this area where they did it in. The government came, saw it. And their excuses were terrible. They were like, one of the buildings got robbed nearby. We don't know who did it, but it was next to that homeless camp. I mean, this is literally like their explanation of it. And then I think they said, there was a fire because they had like a fire to keep warm, right? And the fire department had to come out. They didn't explain that the fire was very much contained and these people were keeping warm. They just explained that the fire department had to come out as though they started some kind of like forest fire, something stupid, right? So we had this situation. Government came, destroyed all the tents, destroyed all the food, made it. They actually stopped people from stopped local voluntary organizations from serving these people food, and said, or giving out clothing, jackets. So they said, nope, we're putting a stop to all that. So that's what happened in Ogden. What did we myself and my Libertarian Party here in Weber County, what did we do? We provided tents, provided food. We got fundraisers going, and this is what we did. Now, I just looked up at the New York Times has this thing that says, like, what is my demographic? Like, you type in your address, and they'll look at your area, and they'll tell you, hey, your average neighbor, you have 50% of your neighbors are Republicans, 40% are Democrats, and 10% are independents or libertarians or something like that. And we are now I think we still could. I mean, this is Utah. We're still like 50% Republican, but we actually have 40% independent since this type of thing happened. And like before this incident, it was something along the lines of like 5%. So people saw what the Libertarians did and they said, I know that I will be taken care of. I trust that. And now I know that my neighbors will take care of me. So for me, this whole solution comes from a very much cultural place that you take care of your neighbors, you make them realize that we'll be taken care of, and it erodes their faith in the government or their faith in, or in a faith in a UBI to say like, that is what is going to get me taken care of. That's kind of a long rant, but because that's my last thoughts on the subject, that's just what I wanted to say. That's what I feel the solution is. Ideally, in an ideal world, that we all take care of each other. And it is very much possible. Like, it's not too hard. It really is one of those things that says I can feed all of the homeless on this dollar amount. It involves breaking some laws and the government will try to stop you. I admit it. We did it. Like, that happens. We found housing for them at people's homes, and these things are kind of dangerous. And I get all that, but it made people say, this is what I trust. This is what I'm going to do. Sam, go ahead and give me your thoughts on what's your ideal society as far as like instead of UBI, or I'm assuming instead of UBI, what would you kind of like to see?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be pretty simple, similar to just voluntarism. So like it goes just back to that plain example where like, everyone, they're like, hey, can this guy needs a ticket to fly, and no one volunteered to give up their ticket. And then later they're just like, hey, he needs a ticket to fly because he needs a liver transplant. And they found a liver transplant and he needs it for his life, and everyone volunteers. So there's just this basic subconscious part of us that just wants to help out and be good in that sort of way. And I think that's the majority of people. America's famous for giving away billions and billions of dollars in charity. Like we do very, very well at that. And I mean, even like donating to the homeless or something like that. Why would you donate to the homeless when we have all these welfare programs and all these systems in place? The fact that we still do that, even it's like above and beyond what's necessary. So I mean, if you just got rid of all of that, the amount of care and the amount of community that would develop would be astounding. I mean, even just like if you got pregnant at 16, like you might live with your parents for a longer period of time, because your parents hopefully would step up. So there's like all these different scenarios where if you're put in that position, people will step up. And I think it's just far more efficient than trying to get the government to intervene and sort of just force people to be good, I guess. I don't know.
Sure. Lou, craft us your ideal, whether it's UBI or otherwise. What's your ideal in this situation? Go ahead and get fancy.
Fancy.
Get fanciful. Dream. You get to do whatever you want. How do we take care of everybody?
Cornfields and giant communes. That's as fancy as it gets for me. No, I really truly am. I laughed. My husband he's an anarchist, but in some ways he's a little more right, which is weird. But I said this the other day to him. I said, I'm not a communist. I'm a communist.
Communalist.
I'm a communalist. I'm a mutualist. I'm a voluntarist, a socialist in that sense. I've always been pretty clear about the fact that, yes, I'm very left leaning so long as there is a government. No government would be the better option for me, right? So this wouldn't even have to be a discussion. I would love for everyone to take care of their neighbor. And like, I guess that's sort of the catch-22. And I brought this up in a previous episode about how, a lot of times you'll hear other leftists make statements about, oh, well, why don't churches let homeless people sleep in the churches, And I think a lot of what, Hodey was saying earlier, there's so much more to being a Christian. I'm a Christian super leftist anarchist, which is a super weird thing. I'm kind of an anomaly that way, but I think being a Christian is what makes me such an anarchist, and a lot of what Hodey gets it. This, I think we should all take care of each other and all of these wonderful things. But I'm not a Darwinist either. Like, I don't want to pull the rug out from under people. I don't believe that we could just turn the government off like there's a light switch and we wouldn't fall into absolute chaos until we create an actual true culture of mutualism and voluntarism and helping your fellow neighbor. And we get the government out of things like zoning regulations and liability clauses that keep churches who don't have millions to spend from housing the homeless. When that happens, yeah, we don't need to look at things like a UBI, right? Because the other programs we have now, you have welfare for the left, right? Is how the right views it. This welfare is a program of the left. But corporate welfare is a program for the right. What's the common denominator there? we can all come together on that. Erase the one and help each other. We don't need the middleman. But until then, everyone should be treated equally, particularly when it comes to the government, the most racist institution there is.
Awesome. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Viewers, hang around. We're about to give you a piece of our minds collectively here in just a minute here. So hang on, and I'll see you in a second. And welcome back, everybody. Piece of my mind segment. I will lead this off. Do you ever read a book that you just say, I can't stop quoting this book? And it was great when I was reading it, but I just use it all the time. For me, that is Leo Tolstoy's The Kingdom of God is Within You. I cannot stop quoting this book. I must have read it 2 or 3 years ago, and it comes up all the time. It's just one of those that, and maybe this will be a shorter piece of my mind segment, but I heavily recommend that you read. It is very much designed for people who are religious, specifically Christian. And you know what, if you're not, then it's probably not your cup of tea, because it generally assumes that you believe the words of Christ. And so, okay, so you start there. I am telling you, I don't know how you can read this book and not become an anarchist afterwards. Because when I first read the book, I was kind of like minarchist, and then I read some of that stuff, and I was just like, I wouldn't say I immediately became an anarchist, but it weighed heavily on my heart for ever since reading it. And I was like, there's got to be some way to contend with these points here, with these quotes, and there just wasn't. And I couldn't. It's one of those that if you need somebody to be an anarchist and you know that they believe in God, absolutely recommend Kingdom of God is Within You. It's on Audible. It's a fantastic listening book. It's well read. So if you're a books on tape kind of person that say, I don't have time to crack open a book and read it, that's cool. Listen on Audible. It's great there too. I actually got it on Audible after I got it on tape in paper, because I was just like, I need to hear this again, some of these points. It is very difficult for a Christian to not be an anarchist and protect and believe in their faith and believe in all the teachings, specifically of Christ. I understand, and I'm not saying it is impossible. It's just very difficult to do. There's some points that you have to contend with, or at least try to explain away, that are very direct. And I love it. It's one of those books that made me not only more in touch with anarchy and the political movement, but made me grow as a person of faith as well, to say I am closer to God today because of these things than I ever was before. We've had a lot of Christian nationalism kind of sneak up on us here in the United States to kind of say, America first, and we deal with a lot of things on a nationalist level here in the United States, and there's a lot of Christians that are part of the problem. I loved my education at Liberty University. I studied theology. I got to study one of the things that I always say is that I'm so grateful that I got to study Islam with someone who was Muslim, and Christians from Christians, and Catholicism from Catholics. And I actually studied with the Krishnas when I studied Hinduism, and it was such a fantastic experience to learn all those things. But I mean, I can't pretend that the Falwells are not part of the Christian nationalism problem. They created a program that is far better than they are, that's for sure. I'm glad to see that Jerry got ousted, and I'm sure the university will improve as a result of that. But these are kind of the problems, is you get taught these things and they seem Christian just because they're culturally affiliated with it. And it really challenged me to look at these things and say, you know what, why do I believe that God loves America the most? Why do I believe these things? Why do I, and there's certain things when you study, I'm a theology major, and when you study the Bible, or gosh, about any other religious work, you'll come to these conclusions that are going to be vastly different when you just read the text or just study the text. These conclusions are very different than what people around you are preaching. And you just say, I am having a tough time making this sync up with this. I mean, how often do we hear, Christ died for your sins, and believe, and, you're going to go to hell if you don't. And then over and over again, I believe it's 3 times the apostles approach Jesus and they say, how do we get into heaven? He says, you get there by not judging other people, by forgiving other people, because that's what's going to measure you as a human being. The stick that is used to that you use to measure others will be used to measure you. And you're just like, man, like, this is what Jesus said, and all that other stuff is something that somebody else said. Like, what do I even believe anymore with my faith? And it's just one of those, I think, impactful novels. So I understand that you two may or may not have read the book. That's fine. But is there any books that have, like, I guess you can comment on what I said, or any other books that you feel like kind of one of those that you're like, oh man, you got to read this, because after I read it, I can't stop talking about it.
Sam?
Lou?
Yeah. Okay. So really to touch on a lot of what you're saying.
God
I'm
did
sorry,
anoint Donald
I just
Trump.
happened to catch this comment. Wait, so you're saying God didn't anoint Donald Trump to save America and own the libs?
Of course he did.
I'm sorry, I had to read that comment. I don't typically see them, but this one like popped up right at that moment.
I love the memes where it's
thought.
like Donald Trump on the cross and like the sun shines
Oh my
a beam of
gosh.
light on him.
It's
And
so
some painter
true.
did it, right? Like some painter did it. Like,
Yeah, like it was.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So,
I have a
sorry.
collection of all
Thank you for that
like super
comment,
Reddit, but anyway.
that was fantastic. Okay, hang on. I'm trying to get back on track here. Okay, so I think, Hodey, you touched on a lot of the reasons why I am an anarchist, period, and also how being a Christian shaped that. And then also how becoming an anarchist deepened my faith, right? Because I stopped looking towards the church and the man and that's gone, right? And I won't get into any details because I don't know how public you are about some of these things, but I believe you and I sort of pivoted from one faith to a different, similarly.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing we were probably on a very similar journey. And I find that really fascinating. I would love to do a show about it.
We'll talk about it for sure. Like, we'll go ahead and make that a for sure. We'll talk about it one of these days.
Yes, because it's fascinating. But it really did, like, that evolution shaped my entire personhood as an adult. When I finally was like, oh, okay, this is it. This is what I am. This is who I am. This is how I feel. It is fundamental. There's nothing political about my political beliefs. They are fundamental. It is 100% based in scripture and in my upbringing. Every Sunday I was made to go to Sunday school and I hated it, right? But what stuck with me were the lessons that were read to me, not the things that preachers preached at me, their interpretations. And I am so thankful for that, because I look now at what sort of the evangelical right. I hate to even say that, right? But it's sad to me because those are supposed to be my brothers and sisters. And I just hurt because I feel like they've lost their heart. And I always think about the story of the Pharisees, and I'm getting super religious. But
I did. I mean, I cited a Christian book. That was my conversation.
Tone
I
it down.
know. This
Tone it
is
down.
weird, right? A super lefty getting like Christian religious. It's so strange. But I can't separate the two. And I could never balance being conservative and a Christian. And I couldn't possibly balance being an atheist and well, okay, I won't say an atheist and a leftist. That's not, but to have those core values, like without my faith, I wouldn't have those core values of helping my brothers and sisters, helping those who are less fortunate than me. All of those things that make me a leftist
Yeah,
are
I mean,
100% based in scripture.
yeah, This even extends, I think, beyond Christianity. Khashoggi got murdered for talking about those parts in the Quran that are like, hey, maybe we're not supposed to be violent with everybody all the time, guys.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of those that I do feel goes across religious lines. Sorry, Sam, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to talk about religion. So, great. So I'll just start with this quote. By forcing man to act morally, in reality would deprive man of the very possibility of being moral. For no action can be virtuous unless it is freely chosen. I posted that on my Facebook and it went nuts for some reason. But I thought it was very just like everyone knows this, of course. Like this is just
totally
common knowledge. And then, it just went nuts. So apparently it was struck a chord with people. But I do think there is something to do with when my background was I grew up like Pentecostal Christian, speaking in tongues, all of that. I never spoke in tongues. I remember getting prayed on and then like the pastor like pushed on me. So then like I like fell backwards. And then I was like, next time you really nice. Oh my gosh. And then so then I was like, next time I'm like, I'm not gonna let him push me over. I'm like, if I fall over, it's gonna be God. So he's like pushing on me. I'm like, yeah. But yeah, still. So that that was my background, and then like I was homeschooled. So then like I went to Baptist churches for like youth group, and that was my only social activity. And I wasn't allowed to watch The Lion Kings. I mean, I just kind of had a weird background, I think. And then I kind of fell into like I was talking to a friend of mine, and he went to seminary, and he kind of had a similar background, and he became like Lutheran. I was just like, we used to hate Lutherans because I mean they drink, and obviously they're going to hell. But he just kind of he put it in he was really good with like theology, and he would explain things in a way that wasn't just like this feely type of way that's like, well, this is how I interpret the Bible. Like that used to be our Bible studies was, well, this is kind of how I would interpret it. This is, what I'm feeling about that. And it's like, I can't do that. I hate reading the Bible because it's like I could interpret this a billion different ways. I could spend years on this one single verse. But my friend, one of the, I guess the impactful things was he just taught me that like, it's not like you get saved and then if you do anything wrong, you're going to hell. So that kind of changed my life because he's like, no, Christ died for you for all time. Like he died for you, you're good to go. Like if you want to live a free life, like Paul says, then go do that. Like give up sin, not because you're avoiding hell, but just because it's a bad idea. You're a free man. Why would you go back to those chains? So that had a really big impact on my life, I would say. And then even just taking a break from really being involved in like I helped start a church and all of this stuff. So, and then there was like a break where I wasn't. And so I was able to and I had kids, and that's how I got involved in politics because I could no longer just play piano for hours. Like I had to hold a baby or this or that. So then it's just like, I'm on my phone, like, oh, universal basic income. Okay. That's interesting. But, so then, I guess, so that's, basically, so then I kind of took what I learned from politics, which is like, I compartmentalized in sort of a separate world. And then I used like the knowledge and the tools from that and kind of just applied them to Christianity. So then that's how I ended up to kind of where I am, I guess.
It's so wild because I think we're going to go 3 for 3 on this. I very much had my politics and religion separate. I was like, hey, separation of church and state, which I still pretty much believe in. I still want, those things. I don't want to enforce, religious things like you mentioned, Sam. It's force. Force is what makes it's not virtuous anymore. And anybody who would use it can say they're doing it for positive means, but I mean, let's be honest here. The people cracking eggs very rarely make omelets. They talk about it a lot, but we see the results. You see the results of involuntary socialism and communism all throughout the world today. Force is the magic ingredient. There's no problem with being equal. That's not the problem, is saying that, oh, we tried to make people too equal. The problem was the force. That was the problem. And so that is like the common denominator there. I talk so much more about my faith now, I mean, even today, I didn't really plan on it too much. I kind of more wanted to talk about the book, but it's hard because I am so much more faithful now with my journey with anarchy, and then my journey of anarchy the two just drive each other so nicely. And this is not purely a Christian thing. I did want to stress as well. I had a series called Creed of the Freed. We only made it to 2 episodes because I couldn't get too many people to participate in an official capacity, because I was looking to official church, religious organizations, and I wanted somebody to represent and talk. And it's hard when you're talking to you represent everybody. It's hard to say something wrong. And so I only got a couple of people that were willing to come on the show. But one of them was this, she was Hindu, and I forget her name, and shame on me for doing it, but it's a fantastic episode. If you look it up, it's on the main Chris Bangle show feed, called Creed of the Freed. It was, and just the way her faith informed her views on liberty were so critical. And I just feel like it's just one of those things that whether you want to be a better person politically or religiously, get really into your faith or get really into your anarchy or libertarianism or whatever it is, and you will find that the other is very much strengthened as a result. Lou, let's go ahead and talk about your peace of mind today.
Well, that's quite a pivot. Okay, so I'm going to talk about more of a local issue, definitely a lefty issue, one that I get all fiery about. I am, how do I say this? Not a fan of the police, right? I'm trying to say this in a way that, I don't know, doesn't get me on another watch list. Right? So I don't, like I literally had a bullet come through my bedroom window and I didn't call the police because why? What are they going to do? So, I'm trying to think. Okay, so last year, I don't know if either of you guys saw the news story. It didn't make national news, but it was sort of at a weird time, and it was very quickly overshadowed by bigger national news. And a gentleman here in South Bend named Eric Logan was shot and killed by police. And I don't remember all of the details of this. It's been 18 months or so since it happened. But it wasn't a good shoot. And it caused a lot of uproar in our community. And I don't remember feeling so connected to my community. Like I was out marching our streets in South Bend before it became cool, right? Like I know that sounds really terrible. But yeah, it was really hard around here, and things got, we had Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Yeah, some of you may have heard of him. He ran for president. That got real hairy after Mr. Logan was shot and killed. And so we also have an amazing BLM group here. Almost weekly, if not daily, they are holding educational classes, they're doing community events, they're going out and doing things with the youth in our city. So they're super active in our community. They're on our city council. They're actively working to change things. And one of the things that they really, really pushed this past year was to create a citizens review board of our police department, particularly, after Mr. Logan was murdered. It has gone around and around and around for months. Who was going to be on it? What were the qualifications? How would we do this? And, all of the things that we wanted in our community. Someone from our community, a civilian, someone who understood the community's perspective. And unfortunately, what we were served this week was a former Indianapolis Metro police officer who, for some reason, was fired. And I have spent the last 48 hours trying to find the information on this. Everything is either redacted or private, or you can't get the information. And I cannot find a news article to save my life other than to say he was fired. So I'm still trying to figure that out. He's not from here. I read through his work history. He's never lived here. Nor was he he's a former police officer. And he's now the paid by the city director of our Citizens Review Board. And this flies in the face of everything we asked for. Everything we have worked for, everything we have marched for, everything we have held these, educational seminars about. And what do you do? What do you do? You feel beaten at this point. You feel like we're getting a civilian Citizens Review Board to make sure that our police are not harming people out, and this is very personal to me because a year and a half ago at 3 p.m, my daughter got off her school bus and she wasn't all the way across. Well, she was all the way across the street and had just hit the sidewalk on our side of the street when a police officer, lights and sirens, went 70 miles an hour or faster down our street. Seconds earlier, he would have hit her and killed her. And when I contacted the police department to report this, and I was told they would not tell me the name of the officer, they handled it. That was it. Like, no apology, no, hey, yeah, we're going to not, we're going to call off at code 0 in residential neighborhoods between these hours because kids are getting off of freaking school buses, right? Our police in South Bend need to be held accountable, and they are not at all. So this guy becoming our director of the Civilian or Citizens Review Board is maddening on every level. And none of us feel like any progress we've made over the last 18 months actually did anything. We thought we were getting somewhere. It's 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
This is a very legal thing. With Lou is not making a supposition that the police don't have an obligation to protect you. They literally do not. Warren v. the District of Columbia is what all this is based on, past the Supreme Court, and I think there's been like 30 trials since then, and all of them have simply deferred to that single decision. You can read the details of that case, and it is absolutely horrifying. There are women getting raped. They call 911. The police literally swing by, refuse to get out of the car, and leave. This happens on multiple occasions. They basically just get raped and raped and raped. It happens for a whole harrowing night. They ask a neighbor to call 911, or they manage to get like a neighbor to call 911. That neighbor ends up getting pulled in and getting raped. And the police did not knowingly just decided not to do anything. There was, I think the dispatcher made like a mistake at one point. The police actually did swing by. He said, looked around, didn't see anything out of place, and kept driving. It's an apartment complex, so I don't know what you thought you were going to see from the street, but okay. And then, at one point, the dispatcher dispatched some, I sent it as like a non-emergency code instead of an emergency code. But there were multiple instances for them to stop these women from getting raped, and they chose not to do so. I'm going to go ahead and give you a quote from this decision here. Neither the Constitution nor state law impose a general duty upon police officers or other government officials to protect individual persons from harm, even when they know the harm will occur. Police can watch someone attack you, refuse to intervene, and not violate the Constitution. So that is the ruling. That's what they go on. That's currently the state of police. Now, I want to throw this out there. Private police or contracted police are required to protect you because they have an obligation. This is a service. You pay for it. It's certainly a free market win for me. When I look at this type of thing, when you see these police have no obligation to protect you, and Lou is mentioning instances where they actually can get away with doing significant amounts of damage to you, and harming you, and actually making a situation worse. We've seen it over and over. And they might get fired out of the benevolence of their heart, out of their hearts, and being like, well, I guess we don't want that to look bad to us. But there's usually very little recourse that we have against the police when they do these destructive things. I mean, I've just offhand seen a police officer see a chihuahua who's barking, pull out a gun, shoot it, keep walking, and just casual as heck, just like nothing happened. Like he's just, this is what I do. I'm totally cool to do this. It's no big deal. And it's a very big deal. Police need to be held accountable. They're human beings. There's no reason they should have special rights. It's a system. It's a systemic problem. So the number one thing, so I used to believe this incorrectly, and I wanted to share this before I turn some time over to Sam. I believed that the reason people were convicted incorrectly was because a jury's emotions got played. Because they just said, oh, we need justice. And I thought that I had to convict this person because somebody needed justice, because that family's over there crying. The prosecution seems pretty sure this person did it. I'm going to do this. That's like the fifth most common reason that convictions get overturned. Number one reason convictions get overturned is because of police and prosecutorial misconduct. They intentionally frame somebody to make it look like they did a crime. They present the fake and erroneous evidence before a jury. The jury is required to believe that information and forbidden from questioning it. In fact, the judge can overrule, or heck, the lawyers can overrule that you can't question the jury that's in evidence, the evidence that's presented. You are required to act on false information, and they get these false convictions. This is the current state of policing in America. You fix it if you feel it can be fixed. If you don't, it needs to be cast into the fire. I am much more inclined to believe that second option, because it is just ruling after ruling, decision after decision, that they can continue to behave in this way. They are no longer doing the majority of their work protecting and serving. I am not saying that nobody needs to protect and serve. I understand people here abolish the police, or, all cops are bastards, and they think of these certain moments where a police officer actually did protect and serve. Yes. Okay. Somebody needs to fulfill that role. I'm not advocating for society where we don't protect each other and nobody comes to your help and there's nobody you can call and anything like that. I certainly believe in, if it's not a service, at the very least, something that neighbors do. It's funny, the original minarchist position, I think, would probably qualify for anarchy today, which is the night watchman state, which is we don't believe in any government unless one of us gets attacked and then we all attack the attacker. That's kind of the night watchman state, which for me strikes me as kind of remarkably anarchist, but yeah, I digress. I mean, and it's not even like there's like a legal obligation there. That's just like a belief that we have a hierarchy over someone who is committing violence, which is why they called it a state. I'd say, for me, I don't get too much hung up on the hierarchy thing and the anarchy thing. Like, you can't have an anarchy without hierarchy. I guess if you do believe that, then I guess it is technically a state, and like they called themselves a state, I guess. But yeah, I do believe you have a hierarchy over someone who's attacking you. And I think that's like the very minimum. Of course, can you do more? Sure. Have systems, have businesses, have things that are, this is the reason McDonald's can't poison your food, right? Like, if McDonald's poison your food, they get in trouble. If the police, shoot your dog, there's not trouble. I mean, we see police headshot little kids because they were trying to shoot something that they shouldn't have been shooting because they were trying to shoot at somebody's dog, and they headshot a kid. They shouldn't have been shooting at the dog, but now they shot a person, and now they're protected because they had a right to shoot at the dog. And they probably had a right to shoot at the person too. I mean, you know, if they didn't catch it on camera, that's what it is. There's too much evidence at this point for me to advocate for the current system as it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Lou.
No, I was just going to say, like, I know you were using this. It's pseudo hypothetical, but I actually remember an article where that literally happened.
Oh, that's a real example.
Okay, I wasn't
I
sure
cited,
if you were being like hypothetical or not because it was kind of vague, but I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was like, it's the same thing to me. Like, there's no difference between that and what happened to Breonna Taylor. None. You broke into someone's house, they defended themselves, and you shot them back. That's not what police do. It's the same. The police, I feel, have come to a point where they culturally feel they are at war with citizens, no longer there to protect and serve. Because at one point in time, it was freaking Mayberry, right?
Yeah, they're bringing the wars to like America.
Right, like it's the police against citizens in their community a lot of times. And this is, again, a whole other episode. I got like a list of them, Hodey.
I absolutely plan on having a police brutality episode. No worries there.
And I used to work for the sheriff's office, so I got lots of fun input there. Okay,
Sam, what are your thoughts on this bit?
Yeah, I'll give my thoughts and then I'll play the devil's advocate real quick. I think the entire justice system is just completely rotten to the core. Like, was it 95% of cases don't even get a jury? And then, you know what?
You're a righty?
No, play devil's advocate. Give him a sec here.
I'm a libertarian, so okay. But anyway, like 95% of cases don't even go to trial. They're just plead out. The cops. I mean, the police not only enforce the laws, they need them to exist. So I mean, it's structured so that they want the drug war because they want to have jobs, right? And it's a lot easier to find some punk hippie guy smoking pot than it is to find, be like Sherlock, like some detective finding
like Bernie Madoff was doing. That requires a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like some cold case, like on TV where they, worked really hard and it was 50 years ago, but they arrested that old guy. Like, yeah, that never happens. But and it's completely rotten to the core, the immunity that the police have, that the prosecutors have. It's just absolutely insane. I think what is it called? I listened to just a couple episodes of Felony Friday, and it just like I couldn't keep listening to more episodes because it was just horrifying to me. Like, I never want to see anything near the justice system. And the other issue we have is if someone is convicted of something, whether or not they're guilty or not, we automatically assume that they were probably guilty. So like we have this giant skew of, over here we have everyone who is convicted. Well, they were probably guilty. And in fairness, they're more likely to be guilty. But so if someone from the guilty camp says, like, oh, I'm actually innocent, we're less likely to believe them. We're more likely to believe the cop or something like that. So it just skews everything. And I think that's a huge problem. So when I hear someone was guilty of something, I try not to make a judgment because, who knows? It could have just been a complete sham. And then I was going to play the devil's advocate. Oh, yeah. So like if you have a plane crash, right? It's extremely rare to have plane crashes. Car accidents are far more common. But if there's a plane crash, everybody hears about it, and it takes up a lot more space in people's minds than would, say, a car crash. Do you think that's the case for like police shooting people or even dogs?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Because here's the thing, but I think that's fine. Because here's the thing: if I murder somebody else, right? And there's more regular murders than there are police murders. But if I murder somebody else, I don't pretend I'm this awesome person who was in charge of a situation.
Yeah, it's true.
I think the thing is the police are supposed to be in charge. They're supposed to be collected. I mean, these are supposed to be this is the monopoly on violence. You say, I am the only one qualified to do this violence right now. So when somebody puts their hands up and you plug them and you say, I thought it was a gun. Look, your average citizen might be like, yeah, but you're supposed to be the guy who says, oh no, I'm quick on the draw. I'm really good at this job. I wanted this job. I fought for this job. I made it illegal for anybody else to do this job. So I think that they're kind of a necessary. You are right, Sam. It does get a disproportionate amount of attention, but I feel that that's fair.
Yeah, that I agree with that. I was thinking too, like what were you gonna say, Lou?
No, I was just agreeing.
I had a thought and then I lost it.
Sorry.
I think at the very least we can agree that like if there are unprocessed rape kits, if you're giving out tickets on the side of the road, F you, buddy. Like if there is one unprocessed rape kit, you should not be doing there should not be speed traps until I don't want to see one more speeding ticket.
Money to pay for the rape kits.
Nope. No. You get paid for by
nobody's believing that shit.
Yeah, no. That's bullcrap. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
There's
now that you've remembered. Go ahead.
No, I haven't remembered yet. It was a good thought, though. It was a great thought.
Some airtime for you. We got you.
What'd you say?
I said we can fill airtime for you because I can just talk out my ass for hours.
It'll come out. It'll come out.
We'll just keep racking up examples of police brutality until Sam remembers, and then his point is going to come off even worse. No.
I found it. I remembered it.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
The other thing with police is we just compartmentalize things. Like if the police does something wrong, like if anybody else did that, it'd be uproar and there'd be consequences and there'd be all these things. And we tend to put police in this certain little box where it's like, yeah, but they're a police officer, it's their job. They're always in the line of duty. It's like, yeah, but the police has no more rights than anyone else. Like I should have every right to defend myself as much equal rights to defend myself and shoot someone as a cop does. The other thing is like we saw this with like the fires with the George Floyd and all of that stuff. We didn't see rooftop Koreans like we did when there were rooftop Koreans, and that's because if you went and you threw some bricks and started a fire, you'd get off on bail and someone would probably pay your bail and no consequences. But if you defended yourself like a certain guy whose name I will not mention, like then you get the books thrown at you. So that's kind of why I think some people are like, well, we can't just get rid of the police, because they don't realize, we also got rid of a lot of the Second Amendment, the right to defend yourself, even if you can have a gun. So once we get back to, you can defend your property and that's admirable and, looked upon kindly by the law, I think that would make huge grounds towards, sort of convincing people also to get rid of the police. So I think it's two sides, if that makes sense.
So I watched the police officers that did the Breonna Taylor raid. They, of course, their body cameras weren't on and functioning during that raid, but they actually have one that they were on and functioning in a different raid. Those same officers who conducted the other raid. And what happened is they jiggled the handle. Of course, they're dead quiet, right? Like sneaking up. They jiggled the handle. The one guy gives the symbol, I guess this, right, is like bash the door down because it's locked. Guy takes the battering ram, smashes it. They all start yelling. The F word is used 4 times before they ever introduce themselves as police. They're like, get on the F and like F and they're all shouting at once. So it's just total mayhem. Right. And then finally, after a couple, and yeah, it's seconds, but like after like what seems like forever, after like 3 or 4 seconds, somebody's like, it's the police. After first telling them like, get the F down, shut the F up, put your effing hands in the air. Like after everybody's shouting all this at once, they finally announce it's the police. Doesn't it make sense? Wouldn't it just be logical self-defense? If you hear your handle jiggle, you get your gun because you're like, somebody's it's late night, somebody's at the door. Your door smashes in and people start yelling expletives at you.
David,
and right. Lou, this is your subject, so I'll give you the final words on that. But I mean, that's just how I see it.
No, I'm completely with you. that whole thing. You can't break into someone's house at 4 a.m. regardless of what you say. Even if the first freaking words out of your mouth were police. How do I know you're not somebody who just wants all my valuables or has a grudge against me, thinking if I say police, like, nor am I going to hear the first words out of your mouth because I'm coming out of a stupor at, what was it, 4 a.m. when this happened to Breonna Taylor or something crazy like that? I'm not going to know what's happening. My dogs are going to be barking. There's yelling. I'm waking up. I'm not going to comprehend that you are police. I'm going to comprehend there's someone in my house. This isn't right. There's my gun. And I'm going to defend myself.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
You cannot expect someone not to defend themselves in their own home. And I say this all the time. And I have a lot of like Democrat lefty friends. I had the quotes around the wrong part. You're only a real, like, you have to go left enough and you get your guns back, right? Like, we hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. Marxists said it. Like, you do not ever hand over your guns. Like, you just don't do it, right? That whole thing drives me crazy. You cannot expect someone not to defend themselves in their own home at 4 a.m. You know you're surprising them. That's the whole point of going in at 4 a.m., right?
Right, yeah.
I've literally been through like training about this. And I just don't, there's no logic behind it. Why?
The logic is all on the person, all on the victims in this case. Yeah, I don't.
It's wild.
Yeah, everybody that's been victimized is like, I don't know. Sometimes they're not behaving like completely rational people, but like the cops always manage to one up them in terms of your rationality in these situations. Like, you did an irrational thing. You said you were
up in your own home at 4 a.m. with lights flashing and people yelling.
Right.
No,
like, right. Yeah. I mean,
you shouldn't have to. It's your own freaking home.
Right. It's a wild situation. Sam, give us a piece of your mind, buddy.
Oh, man. Should I talk about the Mises Caucus or immigration? Pick one.
Dude, it's all you. Mises Caucus is a little bit of insider baseball, but we've had a whole episode about it before. So I mean,
let's do immigration. I'm very like I always tell people, like I believe in private property, so that means private borders and all of that. But in the absence of private property, I think we should have open borders. Like, if the government is going to control the borders, I think they should be open. That's just always been my 2 cents. And one thing that kind of always just irks me about it is when people say, well, you can't have immigration. Someone said immigration.
Yeah, we chose right, apparently. You chose right.
Yeah, it was just for you. You know, I hate it when I'm listening to a podcast and someone will just say, we can't have open borders and the welfare state. And then they'll just move on. It's like, no, like that's the oldest argument ever. And it doesn't even make sense. And even, like Milton Friedman will just say, let's get rid of the welfare state. So it's like just so I always get upset about that. It's like, no. Like, I want to hear sort of the libertarian stance on having borders and all of that, especially, I mostly just listen to podcasts. I don't read. I'm not cool like you, Hodey. But like this podcast is pretty great. But like, it's like, just go on. Like, I want to hear a really good argument against immigration. I mean, the welfare state, like, we're spending so much money. Why would you look at, like, on one hand, a good thing, and on the other hand, a bad thing, and say we need to get rid of the good thing for the sake of saving money from the bad thing? It just doesn't make any sense. And then the other thing I really, and then I think it's the Hoppian sort of view is he sort of, I think, compartmentalizes like the difference between cultural protectionism and like the economy. And to me, I think of, isn't it a Hayek quote where he just says the economy is us?
We are the economy. Yeah.
Yeah, we are the economy. So to me, it's like how you can't separate those two things. Either you have freedom for like labor and culture, and you just allow people to live, and it doesn't make sense to have these government enforced borders. And I also get really upset with what's going on in the borders, and especially with what Biden's doing now. It's like, so all these, and I have a lot of leftist friends who were, really upset with Trump and really posted a lot about Trump with what's going on in the border. And now that Biden is in, I mean, they've acknowledged it, but there's also a lot of crickets. And it's just like, come on, guys. Like, this was the thing you were good on. This is what the thing we could like unite around, is like, we really hate what's going on our border. We think it's stupid. Separating kids from their parents. Why are we doing that? Why are we spending so much money on all of this? And the other thing is like with crime and immigration, like they've done studies where they've like deported a whole bunch of people in a certain area and the crime stayed the same. And what else?
A lot of the immigrant crime you see reported. It's funny because what you see in the headlines are outliers, right? And as someone who worked in journalism for many, many years, if it wasn't an outlier, it wouldn't be a headline, right? But it makes people feel like this is a common occurrence, and it's, and it's not. And then a lot of the, but then they behind that will quote the statistics of immigrant crime. Yeah, well, the crime is being here undocumented.
Yeah.
It's
or I like too where they're like immigrants. I like how they're like immigrants are twice as likely to commit a crime, which I don't think they are. They're actually less likely to commit a crime. But I'll just come back at them with black people are 6 times more likely to commit a crime. Like, should we start deporting black people, or how about like men versus women? Like, should we start deporting like men or all of this? And it just doesn't make any sense. And then a lot of like immigration stuff with the economy and stuff. It's like, would you apply that to children born in the United States? Because I mean, there's 2 ways to enter the United States. You're either born here or you come in over a border. Like, either way, it should have this generally the same impact, except as kids, of course, you're taking more from the system than you would if you come just as an adult. And then you take in the fact that like 45% of all Fortune 500 companies are started by immigrants, first or second generation. And it's like that, even if we were giving out some amount of welfare, which we give out less to them than we do to average citizens. And of course, they're putting in more than average citizens. But even then, like, it would be covered under the fact of just how much wealth they generated through these Fortune 500 companies. So yeah. So those are my thoughts.
Sam, I gotta tell you, okay, minus a couple comments here and there, I think you're more of a lefty than you realize you are.
I might be. I didn't really know how to no one knows how to define what is right, what is left. So
I think Sam's correctly labeled. I think because
I mean, there's definitely a few things I'm like, oh, that's definitely right. But there's a couple things I'm like, okay.
Well, if we were to talk about trans kids, Sam's feelings would change a little bit, right?
Ooh, we could talk about that.
I don't want to do it on this episode. We're going to do it on a whole different episode.
All right.
I'm just bringing things that I know about Sam that would change a little bit. But anyway,
okay.
Go ahead, Lou.
Fair enough. No, there are points of that I definitely agree with. And I think the statistics kind of prove it, as far as, if you're an undocumented immigrant, you are far less likely to be committing welfare fraud because you don't want to get caught, right? Undocumented immigrants pay, I don't remember, it was like $60 billion into the system every year, $62 billion every year, and collect, I won't say absolutely zero, because there are things that they can collect on, but the vast majority of benefits that citizens collect. They will never collect. They do not get Social Security on the taxes they paid.
Yeah, most of them pay Social Security, so they'll just make up a Social Security number, so they pay into the system, and then the Social Security, whatever, doesn't pay out because, of course, it's a fake number, and of course, the people who work Social Security don't work with the people who work like the border controls and all of that. They don't talk to each other because Social Security kind of likes to keep their cash.
Not only that, but like pretty much every day, you know, if they have an over-the-table job, right? Like, and even undocumented immigrants are paying taxes into our system. They will never get back in any benefits, even if they're not using a fake Social Security number. You can still have an immigrant ID number and be considered an undocumented immigrant.
It's Sam, I like the point you brought up at the beginning that there's a logic issue here. Do we reject do we support the drug war until they get rid of government control over healthcare? Like, because somebody could overdose and I would have to pay for their healthcare, and so therefore the government needs to continue the drug war at least until we can get rid of, you know, their control on healthcare. No, two wrongs don't make a right. Get rid of one wrong, force them to deal with the consequences with the other wrong, and that's just the comeuppance. I am not under any illusion. I understand if we completely opened our borders up, that because currently immigrants, what Lou said, everything is true. That absolutely more contributions than even if not more net contributors. We talked earlier in the episode about how hard it is to be a net contributor. Well, we're all in debt. They contribute much less to the debt than your average American citizen. Yeah. I mean, and that is using statistics that are the most anti-immigrant, like that gives them no benefit of the doubt. They're still less of a net debt contributor than your average American citizen. If anything, we're the freeloaders and we need to get kicked out and they need to stay in if you're going to try to justify it economically. I don't like that answer, so I prefer we all stay and we all get to be here. Can't
everybody just get along?
Can't we? Seriously? Here's the thing. We've created a system, and it's right. If we open the borders, there would be several issues that we'd have to contend with. All of those are issues we need to contend with anyway, you know, as far as these like ridiculous ID laws go, as far as taxation goes, as far as property taxes go, you know, all these things kind of fall apart when you open the borders, and that's an awesome thing. And we should continue more of that. Mises converted Hayek from socialism because of the border issue, because he said, if you feel that you can contain your country and run it perfectly, you are going to have to close your borders. Hayek decided that was decidedly unethical. And he said, I can't bring myself to control borders because governments don't do a good job controlling borders. They do things like what you see at the border today, what Biden is doing today. What the Biden administration is doing at the border today is as bad or worse than what Trump has done. And I feel comfortable saying that because he's banned more reporting areas than Trump did. You are not allowed to record as much as you are. Of course, yes, there's an influx of immigrants. Guess what? You ran on being cool to these people. Be cool to these people. That's the bottom line here. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You know, there's a comment here, and I just want to talk about it briefly. Mises believed open borders were an essential feature of free society. It was more people, particularly Caucus and Institute, that Bear's name would side with him over Hop. Okay. I do agree with this, although I will say the Mises Caucus is often pretty cool on borders. There's a few of their constituents, and I know what you're talking about. Believe me, every time I post something open borders, I've mentioned this on prior episodes, I'll get like 4 or 5 people from the Mises Caucus telling me I'm an idiot, right? But Jacob Hornberger had his ad when he was running for the nomination for president was an open borders ad, and it was awesome. And you should check it out. It's still up around there. About immigrants. It was very heartfelt and very logical at the same time. It's very concise. It would have been awesome to see that on mainstream TV. And then, I mean, you'll see the Mises Caucus. They still talk about abolishing ICE. They still talk about opening borders. There are, of course, a few that feel that they should be government run, but I don't know. There's plenty of reasons to fight with the Mises Caucus. I feel like to generalize them, I don't want to do that so much because I feel like the split is not I feel like there's probably, I think Jacob estimated 60% are probably open borders, and I would say it's probably even higher than that. But I don't know. Just Sam, you're actually part of the Mises Caucus, and it's your idea, so go ahead and give us the closing thoughts on that.
Yeah. So a lot of them, like I said, it's never really flushed out a lot of times when I'm like listening to podcasts and stuff. So a lot of times they'll just be like, well, I support private borders, not open borders. And it's like, and fair enough. Like I support private borders over open borders. My only I guess it'd just be like a stepping stone is like, well, yeah, but in the meantime, we should advocate for just opening them up. Yes. Like if the government is could own something, it should be do as little as possible. I want the government to do as little as possible with even what it has. So I guess to me that just makes sense, I guess. As far as the Mises Caucus, yeah, I think 90-80%, and a lot of the people I think they just leap to the idea of just private borders, which is fine. I think at the end of the day, like even like Dave Smith, like me and Dave Smith agree on private borders. We should privatize everything. So that's kind of, I think we all agree.
Yeah. I mean, the nation owning any property and claiming that it's theirs has not helped us with housing costs or national parks or any of this stuff. I mean, created just a ton of problems when they say, no, this is our land. Like, this is my land. As soon as you come to this is our land, but our is the politicians enforcing it how they want, that our doesn't feel like I have much of a say in that land anymore.
Right.
I want the immigrants in. You're preventing them from coming in. I might even want them into my land, come into my borderized territory. But
Right.
You're preventing them from doing that. You bunch
I think
of political Satanists.
I will say another argument that I've heard too is like because I think this is Hoppian, and I'm not well read, so I'm just saying stuff. But I think it's I think the Hoppian view is that because the government, because we pay taxes and the government is in charge, that the government should sort of do something that we all agree on when it comes to immigration. So like it is kind of, because we're all paying taxes for this and all of this, it is up to the government, and we don't have private property, to decide who comes in and who doesn't. But to me, that's sort of like saying, well, it's the same as saying, well, that's a private company when they're doing something really terrible. It's like, just because in some weird way it makes sense doesn't mean you can't call it out for being wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's just completely wrong. It's like, so instead of saying it's a private company, we should be saying like it's a government company. This is stupid. They should not just be doing the ridiculous things they're doing at our borders.
Yeah. If I had my choice in the market, I would choose differently. Yeah. Awesome point, Sam. Lou, Sam, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Everybody else who's listening, thank you so much. You're contributing a great deal. I am able to do more of these episodes than ever before, thanks to just listening and downloading this podcast. It's really all you need to do. If you share it with your friends and download it, and they download it too, all the better. I love having these conversations. I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, everybody stay safe. Thanks for tuning in, and I love you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.